Hey everyone, it's Carl again, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a Savage Worlds rule called Interludes, which is really kind of cool. It gives sort of a mechanical way of rewarding players for telling a story in character about things they've done or their backstory or what have you. But then, why don't I use it very much? It's a savage world, strange as a wind war. It's a savage world, classics to explore. It's a savage world. Hello, everyone. Again, this is Carl with Tabletop Tango, and I would love it if you like or subscribe, just because if I get enough subscribers, I can use some of the community tools, and that would be cool. Anyway, so let's talk about interludes. Interludes aren't really complicated. They're one page worth of rules in the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition, and the idea is you're going to give a Benny to players who participate. And what does participation mean? Well, there's kind of three different categories that something could happen in, or they could tell a story in. One is downtime. What does the hero do between gaming or gaming, between adventures? Backstory, something about the character's past through their own voice and narration. And then trek, a story about an obstacle or something that happened in their travels. And so, based on that category, and it's going to be situational, right? So, if right after an adventure you might do downtime, you would draw a card, and that card suit would define the kinds of things you would say. So, for example, for diamonds, downtime says character studies or works on an object of some sort. What is it? Tell us something. If it was clubs, it would be downtime. Your hero broods or is angry about something. What is it, and how does she misbehave? So it depends on that draw of the card, and that's true for backstory and trek as well. So great, really interesting, but I find that I don't use them very much. It's not because it's not a cool rule, but I have a hard time really aligning it and to what I'm doing, and I was trying to think why that was. Well, for example, downtime, you're drawing a card and it talks about character spends time alone. What do they do? For example, they study or they work on something. My players for downtime, they're role playing it out. They're saying, hey, I want to build a base. How do I get my contacts so I can find the thing I want? I'm going to study this ancient scroll and work through it. Let's role play out what it means, because I'm going to contact some librarian I know, whatever. So their downtime is a very active part of what they're doing. I mostly run modern or science fiction or futuristic, post-apocalyptic type of games, and maybe those lend themselves more to that role-playing things out, because that downtime between, let's say we're talking Cyberpunk, that downtime between jobs could be a session in and of itself of interesting things that they want to do as far as preparing, training, finding weapons or contacts and learning things. Versus maybe in a fantasy, you get done with the dungeon or that adventure that you're on, and now, yeah, it's downtime. What are we doing between adventures? We need to waste some time. Let's draw a card and let's tell a story. Backstory, again, when I've done interludes and I've asked a question, hey, something your hero wants or already has, tell me about that. Sometimes their backstory doesn't support that, and what's kind of neat is, hey guys, it gives you a chance to maybe throw something out that you really weren't even thinking was part of your backstory. But it really doesn't play out. Now, I'd love in the comments to say, how well interludes work for you, and what your players did to make them work. But I found, again, a little weirdness, because I think it's more because they're generic. And you've got you have four ways of you can do interludes for three categories. And so I was thinking to myself, if that's not sufficient, what can I do? And so in my Cyberpunk game, I looked at, maybe the problem isn't the mechanics of interludes. Maybe it really is the fact that they're generic for a generic system. Maybe it should be more aligned with my setting. So for a Cyberpunk setting, think about what kinds of things, and I'm going to roll up here. Think about things that are very particular to it. For example, let's say you're doing a backstory piece of it. Perhaps the question then becomes, drawing the card. The question is, hey, you did a job that went sideways. What was that job? What was the fallout? You worked with another runner at some point, and they turned out to be a problem, or they turned out to be a great ally. What was the adventure you did, or how did that happen? That feels a lot more, how would I say it, a lot more natural for that setting. It's not generic. Obviously, you could line in some of these more generic interlude categories that are in the main book, but it's very particular to the style of game, to that feel. So the mechanics are really cool. Hey, I'm going to give you a Benny. You're going to tell me a story in character. Maybe the other characters, you know, you're in the base of operation and you're bantering with the other players' characters, and this story comes out. Something about your backstory. Maybe Trek doesn't make sense in the cyberpunk world. Maybe something else should make sense. Maybe it's something to do with the politics, or you saw something on television that struck you as interesting, and you went to explore it and learn something about it. Well, what was that, and what did you learn? Maybe those are the sort of things that you'd have categories based on. Instead of downtime, backstory, Trek, maybe there's not a Trek, maybe there's something else. So that's what I was thinking about in my Cyberpunk game, and how that might kind of build on this mechanic, which in and of itself is really simple, useful, interesting. But let's add to it. Let's tweak it. It goes back to every game master likes to build their own tables for things. In this case, we're doing the same thing, but we're taking and saying, what are 4 things in my Cyberpunk setting that would be interesting to players to expound on, that has to do with their backstory, or has to do with them working their downtime, or what have you. Hey, it's setting specific. What about other settings? Maybe those also provide that interest. I've got my God's Awakening campaign, and I've been trying to, as I was thinking about interludes and how I'm not using them, I was thinking, well, what sort of things would fall into that category? So in their downtime, they're very much role-playing out what they want to do, but maybe there's an opportunity to say, here's a couple things in downtime. You're learning more about your power. What do you do that maybe gains followers? You're doing something else. What does that mean? There's things that we can do along that isn't part of the fact that they're building their base out and they really want to spend a lot of time thinking about how it should all get built out and be very hands-on, as opposed to something else. Anyway, I think that makes sense. So anyway, interludes, very cool. As is, might be great for your game. That giving that Benny for some role-playing activity from the player that's structured sometimes helps players, instead of just say, hey, tell me something about yourself and your backstory. This structure gives them a chance to go, oh, I know exactly the kinds of things I need to do. All I'm saying is, for me, I don't use them a lot because I think the structure that's there is a little generic, and my players don't really latch onto it. So now I'm going to try to create some that are very specific to the setting and the feel, things they might do anyway, but we don't need to role play them out. Anyway, so that is all I have to say about interludes right now. If you've got some thoughts, hey, I'd love to hear them. Throw them in the comments. Especially, it's like, hey, you could pull them in more easily if you did X. I think that's the point of what I'm trying to get at. And I would learn something. I would love to learn something. So anyway, I'm Carl with Tabletop Tango. Again, please like, subscribe. It'd be really cool to get the numbers up. Not looking to be famous, but there's some tools that would be cool to use. So anyway, thanks again. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching. It's a savage world, strange as a weird war. It's a savage world, classics to explore. It's a savage world.